Barber, director of the Orange Years. What's going on, man?
Not much, man. How are you, Christian?
I'm doing great. I can't complain.
Yeah.
Weather's getting warm. I'm in Chicago. I don't know about you. It's like 50 degrees here. It's a heat wave in March. So,
Yeah, well, I'm here in Texas, and as you probably
uh,
saw in the news, like we had our first snow in like
right.
decades, and it shut the whole state down. We
I
were
know it's
all
crazy.
without, it's something that people from other states don't necessarily understand because it's
Right.
like we're just not built for this.
Sure.
Other places can handle it, but all that snow, which, again, in any other state probably would be like not that much snow, but
Right.
our power grid shut down, it failed. So we were all without power for like 3 days. It was
I know it's
insane.
crazy. And, the crazy thing, I talked to someone the other day about that. He's a pitcher in Major League Baseball, Rob Zastryzny. He lives in Austin, and he said they had a little bit of an issues, but then he went golfing like 3 days after everything was
Yes,
crazy. I'm like, what? Like, he goes, yeah. I go, no. He goes, that's the thing, I guess. I'm
that's
like,
how it was. I was like, I can't believe that we just went through something that was, horrific, where
right.
everyone was freezing without power, without food. And then like 3 days later, I'm going around
It's just
without
normal.
in a t-shirt. Yeah, it was insane.
Right.
That's Texas for you though.
It
You
is.
never know what the weather's going to do.
That's crazy. Now, obviously, the in the intro, I did the intro before I brought you on. I mentioned a little bit about obviously the film, not a little bit, a lot about it.
Oh, cool.
The Orange Years. I had to address early on because when I said the Orange Years, I said, listen, this isn't a documentary about Number 45. This is
Yeah.
about Nickelodeon, something a little bit more exciting and entertaining. But yeah, I mean, that's, I will start there before I get into really what I want to talk about with you. But how did the idea kind of come to fruition? Because from what it sounds like, I saw some of like the Indiegogo, teasers and trailers to kind of get people in. It sounded more of like it was more of like not spur of the moment, but you were just like, I want to do this. I want to do this. Like, was it something, was there more of a process to it? Or was it an idea that just kind of, boom, came in your head one day and you're like, okay, I want to do it? Or did you have more of a process over the years that led up to actually pulling the trigger and starting this film?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing was, Adam Sweeney, my co-director, and I,
Right.
we just wanted to make a movie. Like
Mm-hmm.
we had tried going about it a more traditional way, writing
Sure.
scripts, getting people interested, networking, blah blah blah, all that crap.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, we're just going to make a movie. We're just going to
Right.
start doing it. And if other people want to come on the journey with us,
Great.
that's awesome. And if they don't, that's fine too.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it was just if it had just been me and him
Mm-hmm.
making it the whole way, and all we got was 5 or 6 people to be interviewed, we were going to do it. We
Yeah.
didn't care. So we had kind of different levels of expectations, and the film ended up exceeding those. It did. It started out as this. It was just going to be this small thing, with me and him interviewing some people, and then it grew and grew and grew, and we were like, we're going to let it get as big as we can, and it got pretty big. And yeah, I mean, it was just a thoroughly amazing experience to go on.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, make it a movie. I mean, I kind of got excited actually when Bill found me on Instagram because I was excited because was able to talk to now someone who's kind of like-minded in the sense that, I mean, you had a little bit more success with the film. It's phenomenal. But I made a documentary too, so I was excited to talk to you about the process of building the Indiegogo and building the brand, building the platform, and seeing, hey, are people going to watch us if it happens?
Yeah.
Because if it's not going to pull anybody, why, waste the money? I had the same mindset that you did. I didn't care if, I had big people in it. I just wanted people in it just so I could tell a story from what I did. But for
Yeah.
you, what was the hardest part about actually getting through the Indiegogo process? At what point were you like, oh shit, we got a monster on our hands now.
Yeah.
People want this. Was that a struggle for you trying to adjust and adapt to the response that you got? Like, oh wow, this is pulling. What are we gonna do? Like, this is turning into something more than what I thought.
Yeah, and what's funny is it actually happened a little bit later. And first of all, our Indiegogo, you hit the nail on the head. That was going to be our litmus test. We
Mhm.
knew if people were going to be into it or not
Those
was
are
whether or not.
tough. Those are
Yeah,
really hard.
if the Indiegogo is successful, that means that the product could be successful because
Sure.
people are
Yeah.
into it. And we said, you know what? If no one donates it, that's probably for the best because then we're not going to waste our time making a movie nobody wants to see. But our Indiegogo was super small, and we only raised about $1,300-$1,400 on there.
But you raised. That's,
but we
I mean,
got it.
that's the key.
And I'll get to, people always say, do you have any advice? And this is leading up to the one piece of advice I would say for anybody who does an Indiegogo for their film. You know, we did the Indiegogo and it was still, people didn't understand what we were doing. They're like, now, what are you doing? You're making a documentary about Nickelodeon. You're making a documentary for Nickelodeon? What is it about? Is it about like one show?
Those are the questions. Yeah.
We couldn't really answer. We had this vision in our mind and we couldn't really answer it. So then we took that, $12,000 initially, and we filmed a bunch of interviews with it.
Right.
And then we edited those together and we had a little trailer. And then a person who came on the ride with us as a producer, his name is Lee Leshin, great guy. He was like, hey, do you want to maybe debut this at New York City Comic-Con, play this trailer?
Yes.
He knew some people from a previous film called Ghost Heads that he had produced. So we did. And when we debuted the trailer at New York City Comic-Con, that's when it blew up. We went from having 400 people on our Facebook to 4,000 in like a couple of days.
Oh my gosh.
It was crazy. It absolutely blew up. And I think the reason was at that point, you know, our trailer was like a little mini version of our movie. We no longer had to describe our vision. People could just see our vision. So I would say, if you want to do an Indiegogo, film something yourself first so people can see your vision. And I mean, we got $12,000, but I bet, I mean, if we had done that, if we had actually filmed something and people could have seen on our Indiegogo that we already had Mark Summers or Kenan Thompson or Kirk Fogg or somebody like that, they would have been more inclined to get on board from the very beginning. Yeah.
That's key. Because you know what? That's funny because I asked that because I was trying to figure out, like, you know, because I did that and that's where I went wrong. That's like when people start a podcast, I guess they always say to make sure you have, like, you launch with like 5 or 6 episodes, and you nailed it on the head there. Because if people are going to give you their money, I mean, people are going to work 8 hours a day. They're working, they're busting their butt to make money, pay for the bills, provide food. What are you going to do?
Yeah. What are you going to do
to get that money? Yeah. So it's like, that's the thing where I think I failed. And a lot of people do, just in general with that stuff, is having more of a plan. But no, it obviously worked out. The interesting thing is too, I saw I listened to a few podcasts from, you know, just Googled and listened to some of you talking about some of the stuff about the film. But the interesting thing is you had really no prior directorial background, correct? You had some acting credits, but what was, I mean, to do something as amazing as you did with the Orange Years with Adam, what was, I mean, you had to have a very kind of, interesting childhood, because there was a couple key points in there that you mentioned in one of the interviews, says that at a young age, parents, I think, got divorced, and someone in that film that you did even talked about, at that time, the divorce rate was high. Kids are coming home from school. They needed an outlet. Nickelodeon. Was that really, asking someone who, went through it at the time in which she was, targeting and talking about, was that really the case for you? Was that your outlet as a child growing up?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I was kind of the target demographic, and we kind of found, whenever they told us that, we're like, that's the whole reason we were making this documentary. We didn't know it until they said it, but we were, both Adam and I were both the target demographic. And I think that's why Nickelodeon meant so much to us, because, kids were coming home and with no parents for the first time. It was there before, but really in the 80s, that's when divorce rates were up. You had both mom and dad at work. So you're coming home from school, you're unlocking the door yourself, and just, what do? You're all alone, you're watching TV. And thank goodness that there was something that, TV, shouldn't raise kids. That's not the way it should be. But if it's gotta be, thank God it's something that's actually pretty cool and is actually trying to be positive for kids, like Nickelodeon was at the time.
Right, at the time. And that's something that I want to get on later. But, just because I like long form and just trying to, just to talk to people. When that happened at the time, when, divorces in life certainly pull the heartstrings in many different ways. But what was the hardest part about that for you as a child? And what was it? Did it happen at the very time in life that were the formative years, the years where you're discovering things, you're discovering who's who, what's what, she, him, all that stuff? Did it happen at that time? And what was so hard for you, and what was so tough about that process as someone still growing up, as far as understanding the magnitude of something like that?
Yeah, I mean, they Jerry Laybourne also says something in there. Kids were becoming their parents' confidants. Kids were
Mm,
forced to kind of understand something that is maybe too big. And I can remember the hardest thing for me was seeing how hurt my mom was.
mm,
And I was a kid, but you're
yeah,
seeing someone whose world just basically came crashing
sure,
down. And that was really difficult for me to understand, to see your parent, who's your guardian,
right.
in such an immense amount of pain.
Hmm.
That's what had a very lingering, long lasting effect on me, for sure.
Hmm. So what was, I mean, besides Nickelodeon, what was, obviously, I mean, we all have outlets that kind of cope and we use to
Mhm.
divert and distract, things that are going on inside. We all have those things. But what was besides, having that outlet of, escaping and watching, cartoons for an hour a night or whatever it may be, were there other things at that time that you used as a vice to kind of balance the craziness that was going on for you?
Oh yeah, there were lots of things. I mean, I think I definitely, it was a good and a bad thing. It was kind of a double edged sword. As I
Yeah.
looked to escapism a
Hmm.
lot. I loved reading comic books and movies and TV, just anything
Yeah.
that took me to another world so I could kind of detach from reality and be somewhere else. Nickelodeon did that for me for sure, but then also, I loved reading X-Men comic books and I loved watching Star Wars and sci-fi. And yeah, it wasn't good because it was definitely a crutch. I was
Sure.
escaping the real world when I really needed to be in the real world and deal
Hmm.
with my problems. I was escaping, but it also gave me a passion for things like movies, and
Yeah.
now that's what I'm doing with my life. So it was, I guess, both good and bad. It probably evened out a perfect wash of the negative and positive effects of that.
Sure. The funny thing is my parents, they're married still, but the thing is there's a lot of similarities, but just in what you're saying that I could kind of relate to.
Mm,
Very introverted. I'm making that assumption on you, correct?
yes.
Growing up, same with me. And the thing is that made me kind of laugh was because I kind of fell into that same thing too. Was you also were in an indie band, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
That's what I'm into too. So at what point did you, what point did the whole music thing come into the picture for you?
Mm, yeah, pretty quick. Pretty quick. By the time I was 14, I was playing in bands and stuff like that. Like I got my first guitar around 13, 14, and started
That's
playing in
awesome.
bands. And what's funny is the first guy I was ever in a band with was a guy named Jeff Johnson. And he did all the animation for the Orange Years.
No way. That's crazy.
And me and him pulled out our guitar and drums and recorded some of the music for the
Of the
Orange
music.
Years as
Wow.
well. Yeah. The majority of the music, it was done by a fantastic guy named Darren Beck.
Hmm.
But I kind of I had a very specific sound that I wanted for the Pete and
Sure.
Pete segment. And that's kind of the kind of music that me and Jay made back in the day, kind of Dinosaur Jr., kind of
Hmm.
that kind of super chunk kind of rock and roll. So me and him just recorded one song for the Pete and Pete segment. So that was a blast to get to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now I know with the film that obviously you were submitted to the DOC New York in 2018. Prior to that, were there any earlier screenings or earlier
No.
viewings? No. So that was the very first. What was are you a parent? This is where I want to ask that before I go
Yes.
on. Okay, perfect. So that kind of leads me then into really what I wanted to ask you. So, being a parent, obviously, kids growing up now, the viewings and the way that we consume media, the way kids consume media now, is extremely different than it was, when you were growing up. It's strange to say it, but there really is. It is quite an extreme difference in what's
Yeah.
consumed, how it's consumed, what's available, what isn't available. Back then, all you had was a TV, if that was like a treat. And now the various media forms that have come in over the past, I mean, geez, just in the past 5 years, but more in the past 10, 15 years. How has that changed the way you've raised and parented your kid? Because Nickelodeon isn't the same Nickelodeon that it was back then. I mean, I feel like the Nickelodeon shows that were on back then, I mean, they were different in the sense that they didn't have to deal with the censoring and the canceling of today's culture. Nowadays, a lot of those shows back then wouldn't last a second in a board meeting. And so as a parent yourself, what was so confusing and so fascinating, and just both pros and cons of this process for you, seeing the way, you know, your children are consuming media and Nickelodeon during this time as compared to the time in which you grew up with it?
You know, one of the things, I think everything in moderation. You know, some people
Sure.
say TV is awful, and then modern parents say YouTube and iPads are awful.
Mhm.
There's always been things that are awful. And to me,
Right.
everything in moderation, and you just have to be involved in your kid's life. You know, you have to, know what they're watching,
Right.
and know how much they're watching. If you let, the same way you shouldn't let a TV raise your kid, you shouldn't let an iPad raise your kid. But it was fine to let your kids watch TV. And I think
Right.
it's fine with iPads. One of the things I think is harder is, you know, it's easier to keep an eye on your kid when it's on a big TV.
Right.
You couldn't sneak something in. You couldn't watch an R-rated movie on the TV on a
Right.
big TV in your living room because your mom and dad are going to find out.
Exactly.
Now it's a lot easier. Kids are watching it on a tiny little thing like this that they could be hiding in their room.
Exactly.
So it's just, I think nowadays it's fine to have kids on iPads and stuff like that. You just have to be aware of what they're watching and really keep a close eye, because they can sneak to their room or, put their earbuds in and they're sitting there like this and you don't know what they're watching. You just have to go the extra mile, because it's a lot easier to hide a small little phone than a big, huge TV. But, I know all my kids' favorite YouTubers and stuff like that. And I just keep an eye on what they're watching.
Sure.
And one thing I noticed before I started this process of making the Orange Years, I noticed something. My kids would much rather watch YouTube than watch Netflix. And I didn't understand that. Why would you rather watch something that's just a kid unboxing their toys or playing the toys than watch something that's like has real production value?
Right.
And I think the Orange Years helped me figure that out. And that is one thing that so many of the creators said for all these Nickelodeon shows. The creator of Salute Your Shorts, the creator of You Can't Do It on Television, the creator of Pete and Pete, the creator of all of Clarissa, all those shows said the same thing. We had kids that looked like real kids and acted like real kids. And that's why kids gravitated towards Nickelodeon, because they looked like you. They didn't have makeup. They had acne. They had braces. Some of them were overweight. Some of them were underweight. Right. There were nerds. There were all sorts of kids dealing with real problems. That's why kids latched on to Nickelodeon more than Disney Channel, because the kids felt like them. And I truly feel like that's why kids watch YouTube today, because when you turn on the TV, those kids don't look like the regular kids. Nope. They're all kids with superpowers, or I'm secretly a pop star. I'm secretly a genius. I'm secretly building robots. It's all these kids that are nothing like, they don't act like real kids. And kids have a desire to see kids like them. And that's enter YouTube. That's why they like it, because it's it's just regular kids who are making shows with their little crappy cameras or with their iPhones or whatever, but it's relatable. And that's anybody that wonders why kids watch YouTube over Netflix, I say that's why, because they want somebody that looks like them and reflects them and what they're going through.
You know what? I've never, ever thought about it that way. Because as I sit here, as you said that about they want to watch stuff that they can relate to, is my favorite Nickelodeon show of all time was Rocket Power. Love that. Yeah. They've literally hit every demographic, every personality. You had the stoner, you had the punk, you had the smarty. I mean, you had every person in that show. I mean, there's somebody can relate to.
Yeah.
And now you have these unattainable and unachievable expectations that are set out in a lot of these shows now. That certainly, one, it's not good because it's unrealistic. And two, that then goes back into what I wanted to talk with you about mental health. Does that, you think, does the shift in where cartoons and, quote unquote children's shows, anything that should be a children's show, I think should be promoting and advancing positive growth and mental health for kids and self-esteem, because that's huge right now. Do you think that the unrealistic expectations that a lot of these shows now set has in fact increased and really affected and altered the way kids' mental health is in this country?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert there, and I
Oh,
haven't done
neither am I.
but I would say yes. I
Sure.
mean, I would say absolutely. It's definitely unrealistic expectations,
Hmm.
and probably, yes, I would say it's definitely not good. But it's entertaining, I
Sure.
think as long as there's an alternative, like I watched the Disney Channel and I watched Mickey Mouse Club growing up,
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
and I never necessarily thought I could hang out with them. Or that they would want to hang out with me because they were all perfect. They had perfect teeth and perfect
Right. Yeah.
bleached blonde tips, and they could sing and they could dance. But it
Mhm.
was entertaining, so it
Right.
was cool. Whereas Pete and Pete or Salute Your Shorts, those kids felt like me. So I guess there's a need for both. So whatever.
Right. Now, by doing the documentary, through that process, what did you learn about not only yourself but about the industry for cartoons as a whole by doing so? Obviously, before you wouldn't have done this without any love or admiration or passion for Nickelodeon and the catalog of shows that they've curated over the years. But what did you learn through the process that you didn't know before after doing the movie?
Mm. I learned so much. I mean, about Nickelodeon, I learned a lot.
Hmm.
In that, just it's weird to think about a time when kids programming didn't exist.
Yeah.
Hindsight is always 2020. We can see it now, it's everywhere.
Right.
But it's weird to think that somebody had to build that. It's like when you're driving down the road and it's awesome. You have this great highway that can get you from one city
Right.
to another, but you have to remember
Someone built that.
someone built that. There was a
Yeah.
time when this didn't exist. It
Hmm.
was someone had to build that. And that's what I really learned is it's interesting. All this stuff that seems like a no-brainer now,
Sure.
they had to create that. And I think that's what I hope people that watch the film really enjoy is seeing how we got to where we are
Mhm.
today with kids programming, because we really do take you all the way day one when there was nothing, and how every brick was laid out, and it was just brick by brick to get where we are today.
Absolutely. Now, with the film, obviously, with the film, when you're sitting there with Adam making these decisions about, who should we include, whose stories do we want to be told, blah 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 blah. When you're making that decision, obviously, you're infiltrated with a bunch of emails, a bunch of messages or context coming in from outside saying, "Oh, I'd love to," but. What was the hardest part about siphoning and filtering out the ones that would promote to the message and the ones that really you just didn't kind of you didn't feel that their story would add to what it is that you're trying to put out there to people? Was that a hard process for you, or was it relatively quite easy given the fact of the success that it did at Doc NY?
It was, beginning when we started trying to book these interviews, it was insanely hard.
Oh, it's tough.
One thing I always say is, if you're making a documentary about a movie,
Mhm.
you just get the people, like let's say we decided to do a documentary about Good Burger.
Mhm.
You get the people that were in it, and then a couple
Right.
of people that wrote it, directed it,
Mhm.
and you're good, and that's
Right.
it, and they probably know each other. But we're doing a documentary not about a movie or a TV show, but about a whole network for 20
Right.
years. And all these shows were filmed all over the place. Salute Your Shorts was filmed in California. Hey Dude was filmed in Arizona. Double Dare was filmed in Florida. And then Are You Afraid of the Dark was up in Canada. You Can't Do That on Television was up in Canada, but in Ottawa. So
Mhm.
none of these people knew each other. So it was insanely hard to get anybody. And it got easier and easier and easier the more people we got. It got exponentially easier because people would tell their friends, and we could also go to somebody else and go,
Right.
"Oh, we've already got this person, this person, this person." Um, But the first thing we did is, well, what are we trying to tell here?
Sure.
What story are we telling? And we knew it was Geraldine Laybourne's
That's what I want. Perfect.
story. And she, you know, she's the trailblazing visionary that made Nickelodeon what it was. So that gave us a cutoff point. When she left Nickelodeon, that's whenever we stopped. You know, I think there are great shows that happened afterwards. You know, a lot of people say that our doc is about the golden era of Nickelodeon. Well, we're not trying to say that was the golden era, because I think there are great shows that happened afterwards. It's just the first era. It's about the young years of Nickelodeon. How did we get here? So that said, okay, that was the first thing. Okay, well, any of the shows that happened in basically throughout the 80s and 90s, because we're telling Geraldine's story. And then it was what shows helped propel it forward. You know, like, for example, You Can't Do That on Television was their first hit, but Double Dare was their first show that they made. And then Hey Dude was their first sitcom. And then Doug, Rugrats, Ren and Stimpy, those were the first cartoons. So we always had to remember, it's not a documentary about the shows, it's a documentary about Nickelodeon. So anytime we talk about the show, it had to further serve the bigger story of Nickelodeon. And we knew there would be certain people that are mad because their favorite show, you know, didn't get the love that it got. And we just had to be ready for that. So we knew which shows we wanted to focus on, and those are the people we reached out to. And then, you know, there were certain shows, you know, that either if we couldn't get the footage or if we couldn't get any interviews, we kind of couldn't focus on that show because we didn't have anything to back it up. So we tried to give love in other ways, like at least show a clip of it. Even if we couldn't kind of give it a moment, we at least gave it a little bit of love if we couldn't, because there was a lot of people that said, I'm just not interested in doing this documentary.
How disappointing was that, though? I mean, how dejecting was it? Like, come on, really?
Yeah, I mean, it was only disappointed in the very beginning when we were like, it felt like everybody was saying no. You know, and then once, you know, because we knew we didn't have to get everybody, but we wanted to get as many people as we could. And once we had enough people that we knew that, okay, everybody else is icing on the cake. We've got enough. If we had to cut the documentary with just the people we have now, it would be okay. You know, we could certainly put out a good doc. It just got better and better as more and more people started saying yes.
Sure. Now, why film? Why'd you want to get into entertainment and movies just in general? I mean, obviously an actor prior to doing this directorial job. I mean, for someone as an introvert, because I remember in high school, I cried on stage in theater class, but I had to do it because that was the way I was able to break out of the mold and just kind of actually just even converse with people. It was that bad for me. Coming out of that shell and breaking into something quite different and something that's not as sheltered or you know, as, I mean, you're out there, you're communicating, you're acting and stuff like that. What was the hardest part about breaking into that, and why?
So I was a musician, and then I kind of got, the hardest part was and that's where I got a love for performing, because I loved both recording. That was fun to be in the studio and layering it and getting everything perfect. You could really be experimental.
Sure.
And a lot of that love is transferred over into film, you know, where you're editing, because I do both filming and editing. I love both. I love being both production and post-production. And I think it came from music. I loved, you know, filming is kind of like playing live. You're there, you're interacting with people. You better do a good job.
Right.
And then post-production is kind of like, you know, mixing an album, you know, you're doing all the cool stuff to make it polished.
Right.
But, you know, I got really fed up with the music industry and didn't want to do it anymore. But I did have that love for performing and being an artist. So that's what led to me getting into acting. And I went to Dallas, Texas, because I live in Texas.
Right.
And I had heard that Dallas had a pretty good market there. And it does. But Dallas, it has a certain look there. Like people like me that would have a more character actor look, you know, I'd probably get cast, at least at the time, I was like in my late 20s, I'd probably be cast as like the stoner friend on a TV show, or like the weirdo or something like that. I almost got the part, his name was just Tweaker Guy on Breaking Bad. I was in the running for that. I didn't get it, but I was close. He was kind of like a twisted, weird version of Jesse Pinkman. Like they needed someone that looked like Jesse Pinkman, but just way worse.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
Right. Yeah, it's probably bad,
Yeah.
but I almost got that, and so I had moderate success. So anyway, because of being in Dallas, and I was an actor,
Hmm.
but the really people that have a more traditional Ken and Barbie look are who really succeed in Dallas. Me and
So
some of my
strange.
because there's a lot of, it's more like commercials, like they need someone like, you should choose Jexa Energy because it's it's
Right.
that, like spokespeople, not like cool independent film projects, at least at the time. Now there is a lot cooler stuff there. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna start making my own films, and then I can cast myself, or my friends. It doesn't matter how we look.
Hmm.
We can make these weird films. So I befriended a guy named Jared Costa out there, and Darren Beck, who ended up doing
Right.
the music for the Orange Years, and we would just make these weird films that were the way we wanted to do it. And then I kind of fell in love more with being behind the camera than in front of it, and that's when I realized I wanted to be a writer and a director at that point.
Sure. So prior to all that stuff, then I mean, what was I mean to do all that stuff kind of on your own and stuff like that? What kept you going? Was it really just the love for it and the
Yeah,
perspective, hope, and possibility of finding that breakthrough? I mean, it sounded like it was a profound love and passion for it because a
yeah,
lot of people, if they don't get it on that first attempt, they'll give up and throw it away. Was that
yeah.
truly from the first moment on, you knew that this is exactly what you wanted to do?
Yeah, and I mean, I loved it so much that I think I had a lot of friends and a lot of support,
That
because
helps.
it's always getting through the part where you suck. Everyone,
Yeah,
no matter what you do, you're, even if you have a God-given gift for it, you're
sure.
going to suck for a little
You
while,
have to.
And the fact that I think I had a lot of friends and people like that, that
Mhm.
we were doing it all together. Like I was around people that were better than me, so I was able to like just have fun with it. And I said, yeah, I want to do it, And then I got married and had kids, and
That
uh,
changed everything.
it changed everything, and I had to pay the bills
Yeah,
somehow. And it's like, okay, great. I mean, I had an okay job, but I kind of didn't see a future there. And
sure.
I was like, God, my only skills are like making movies and stuff like that. But I got like a little baby to support, and a, lights to keep on. What do I do? So me and my wife, we started using our filming and editing stuff, our skills that we both
Mhm.
had, to get into more commercial work. Like we would
Wow.
film, music videos and commercials and stuff like that, corporate work. And so that was actually, even though I felt like I was selling out, I actually learned a lot and got a
Sure.
lot better doing that, because it had to be good. It had to be
Right.
good because I had to make money. And then that's when I was doing that is whenever I realized like I could make a documentary, because I'm already kind of making documentaries for other people. So when I
Sure.
ran that idea past Adam, I was like, hey man, instead of a script, we should just do a documentary. That's why I brought that idea to him, because I knew that based on what I was doing in my professional
Mhm.
job, I could kind of combine the two things, what I was doing for a living and what I wanted to do for fun. I could combine those.
Absolutely.
And I mean, how many people get to do that? That was really awesome that I was, and I mean, 90% of that is that I had a wife that supported me and let me do that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a big
Um,
help, I'd
mhm.
say. Now, what did your wife do? I mean, to for her to join forces with you and do that commercial stuff to kind of, compensate for those things called bills. Those things, they're frustrating.
Mhm.
Um, what was she doing that kind of, you guys, heads went together and you were able to monetize and make money off more commercial stuffs at the time? What background did she have?
She a lot of different things. Both of us are these kind of weird, eclectic people that have lived 1,000 different lives.
Sure.
She had a background in photography and
Oh,
also art, and so uh, you know, all she had to learn, she already had the eye for it and the
sure.
artistry and the creativity. All she had to learn was the technical aspect, like how to work the camera. And
Hmm.
so that took her, a couple of months, and then she was up and running and was awesome,
Hmm.
and she's a real big people person. So she does a lot of the sales and like talks to clients and stuff like that, because she's just really charming. And so the two of us together were just kind of like a perfect team.
Sure. So it's crazy. So from someone who's so introverted to now being someone who's so opposite of that, how has then the pandemic changed and altered the way of your guys' living, given the fact that,
God, yeah.
I mean, sets stopping. There's no film. I mean, I have family members who work at SinSpace in Chicago. They were laid off for months, and then finally they were able to get back. I mean, some of these sets and stuff, some of these, I mean, you're having hundreds of people there at thing. How life-changing and altering was that? I mean, we all have the story. Well, 11 months ago, I've been out of work, yada yada yada. But how impactful and life-changing was it for you to someone who didn't have, let's just say, a 9 to 5, someone who is in the arts, and that's what
Yeah.
hit big, because that's what I do. I'm concert photography. That the industry just was shuttered. What was the compensation, and how did you make do and find ways around that to still provide and keep the lights on?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I did have two sets of skills, and people always told me don't do that. Focus on one thing
You got to
and
have
be good at
backup.
that. And that was my thing is I want to learn. I want to be a writer and director, so I want to be really great at that.
Yes,
But I want to know how to do everything else at least pretty good.
sure.
So I do edit. I was one of the editors on the Orange Years.
Yep,
That's what I do for a living. So I film stuff and I also edit.
yep.
So because of that, I was able to pivot and just take more editing
Editing, yeah.
jobs, where a lot of people, because you can't film, they're kind of recycling their old videos, and people would be like, help, I need to make a new video. I'm going to just send you. They would just, there's a couple companies that I work for that are in California, and I'm in Texas, and they just send me stuff.
Send the stuff.
And they're like, make this look new, take our old commercials and rearrange it and put a new voiceover. And I had to learn some new skills, like taking Zoom meetings, because everyone's doing Zoom. You can't actually film anybody anymore. So I would take Zoom meetings, and I had to learn how to make those look prettier, put a little lower third down at the down at the bottom, and put an overlay and edit all that stuff. So I had to learn some new skills, but luckily, because I had a strong background in post-production, I was able just to kind of pivot towards that. And we've done okay through this.
Okay, I'd say so. Now, what did you go to college for this too? You said.
Yeah, I did. Well, I went to a place called the Katy Studio. That's a
Katy Studios.
conservatory in Dallas.
Mhm.
And they kind of teach you everything. They teach you acting, audition. They also taught us like film stuff. They also,
Right.
and that's kind of where I got a love for it. We had to make a short film, was one of our, final projects. But it's just basically you go hard for a year and a half, and then you get a degree out of that. So that's the only degree that I have. I don't have a full bachelor's.
Now, with everything going on too, so obviously that the Orange Years, was there anything else that you and Adam have kind of bumped heads with as far as future projects, or was this like the documentary where you literally wanted to do this for a while, you did it, and now you're just kind of laying low waiting for that next thought to pop in your head? Or are you currently working on other documentaries at this very time?
Oh yeah, like I will say, originally it's amazing. You find what you love.
Sure.
And originally the documentary for me, I can't speak for anybody else involved in the project, but we worked with some amazing people.
Sure.
That are everybody. This was kind of cool. It was like where we all got our start, and now we're kind of all doing our own thing. And I'm so proud of everybody. But for me, the documentary was just a means to an end. Oh, let's do it so I can get a film under my belt,
Right.
and then do other things. And now I fell in love with documentary filmmaking so much. So that's what I want to do. I want to make documentaries. I'd love to make a narrative feature, but for the foreseeable future, I see myself working on a couple of other documentaries. I'm currently working on a couple of documentaries, both my own that are mine, my project, and then also working for other people on other. I'm able to help other people with their documentaries and take more of a producer role or an editorial role. But I love that world, and I love the people that I've met so much.
As a documentary filmmaker, obviously there's so many different types of documentaries. What is the difference, the biggest difference for you as far as a feature and a short, and both of the stuff that each encompass? Because they're both very different. Obviously, one's short, one's long, but the short is the thing that interests me the most, because you could have a short that could be literally it could be half an hour. As a documentary, you presumptively assume, you're documenting a very huge part of whether it be in an event or time in life. What is so hard about a short? A feature, obviously, it's just fair game. all out. I mean, you could have it as long as it could be, but what is the hardest part about nailing a documentary short, in your opinion?
Nailing a documentary short, like a 20-minute
Yes,
documentary or something
but
like that.
getting all the details there enough to document and fully inform who's ever viewing
Yeah.
what it is your goal was to do.
I mean, that's what I would say is to be able to tell a competent story that in that short amount of time is difficult. You know, I mean, us whittling the orange ears down to 90 minutes was very difficult, you know. And I think personally, I've never done that before.
Mhm.
Like tried to make a documentary short, but I have a friend that did, a really talented guy named Bradford Thomason, who edited the orange ears with me. He was one of the editors. He had a short called Lost Weekend that's
Mm.
about a teenager back in the early 80s that won a weekend with Van Halen. He got to party with
Oh
Van
my
Halen
gosh,
when he
it's
was like
insane.
15 years old, which on one hand seems awesome, but also it's like a 15-year-old child should not be partying with these grown men, you know,
No, there
especially
was probably drugs.
probably, you know. But he did that short, and it's called Lost Weekend, and he had a lot of success with it. He got it in Tribeca.
Holy
It,
cow.
it it premiered at Tribeca and has done well. I would say for me the hardest part would be like knowing why are you doing this? You know,
Right.
what's your point? Is it to get people to invest in you, or is it are you making a like are you making it because you later on want to make a bigger one? So
Sure.
you're hoping to, you know, like for example, Bradford, he did make a splash with Lost Weekend. A lot of people were interested in it, and that did help his clout. Even though that's a where are you going to put that? You know, you can't put it
Right.
on Netflix or Hulu; it's too short. But it did help him in terms of like clout and you know, prestige. So
Mhm.
that's my thing is like coming up with a battle plan. If you're going to get money for it, if you're going to invest your time, what's realizing what's the end goal of making this short? Why are you
Right.
doing it? You know?
Mhm. Now, I have a question for you as someone who's kind of involved with a. Well, see, this is we're trying to figure out the identity of it, if a documentary or a docu series. What would you say? I mean, what is the deciding factor in your opinion when it comes down to choosing whether something should be just a documentary feature or a docu series? Because I'm involved with a documentary called 594 Miles from Chicago. It's a blues documentary focused on history of Chicago blues, and we're struggling with the idea of making a documentary or docu-series. Docu-series, focusing on certain individuals in that blues journey, or a documentary highlighting a few big ones in a feature. What's the hardest part for you, or what do you think is something that documentary filmmakers out there should be looking at and should make decisions on as far as determining whether something should be a docu-series or a documentary? And do
Yeah.
you think that decision really affects the performance of it once it's released? Because some people, the attention span is very short now. Some people aren't going to want to sit through something 3 hours long. If you throw 45 minutes at them over a course of time, oh, there you go. Now it's fair game. What's the
Yeah.
hardest part when making that decision for documentary filmmakers out there?
Man, you know, that's a great question. And I will be totally honest, I
Sure.
do not have the answer
Mm-hmm.
because both the Orange Years is something that I had pitched as a docu-series,
Mm-hmm.
and the documentary that I'm working on now, we're struggling with you know, we've talked about that with the next one. We
Okay,
could
so
make it a
we're not
docu-series.
alone then. There's that. I mean,
No.
it's still something that people are struggling with.
I would almost say, you know what, if you have the time, effort, here's the thing that I found is you just got to do it yourself. Like we when we had the Orange Years
Mm-hmm.
and we were trying to find a buyer,
Right.
we told everybody this could be a docu series,
Yes.
but nobody. We would have to show them that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say you got to make that decision yourself and just
Sure.
have it ready. So when you have a buyer, you could show them both. Like I know it's like essentially creating double the work for yourself,
Right.
but I feel like that's the only way to do it because we were like telling people like, hey, because we realized at the end of the Orange Years, we're like, this really probably should have been a docu series, but it was too late. You know, there are pros and cons. I mean, obviously, you're not going to get into a film festival with a docu series. I
Right.
think documentaries have more of a punch.
Sure.
There's more of a chance of it going somewhere. But a docu series, if you can sell it, you're going to have better luck because, like you said, it's 4 episodes long.
Right.
So I mean, that's a tough one. I would just say it's something you got to know. I would say just don't, like, I've seen some things that are a docuseries, and this is just my opinion,
Sure.
that shouldn't have been. If you feel like you're having to pad it, like, oh, we got to add something else, then don't do it, But
Right.
something like the Orange Years, where you're feeling like, God, we could easily make this a three-part, four-part series with all the crap we had to cut out, then, do it,
Right.
But it's tough.
Yeah. Oh, see, that's the part that is interesting too. The crap that you had to cut out. That's the hardest part of, choosing, because all the stuff you wouldn't have filmed, stuff that you wouldn't not film stuff that you wouldn't think would provide or add to
Yeah.
the story or enhance the story that you're trying to tell. So getting to that part when you're looking at and you're making those decisions to cut, how hard was that, trying to say, oh, you know what, all the time, money. I mean, making those decisions, that's got to be tough.
It was insanely hard. And that was the one thing that I mentioned Bradford Thomason
Yes.
before. Working with him was great for two reasons. One, he's just a super talented dude,
Mhm.
and he had already done it. He had already made a documentary called The Rockafire Explosion. He had done one called The Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, and then he had done one called Life in Waves. That's about.
I'm writing this down, by the way, because I want to
Oh,
check all
sure.
these out. Go ahead.
He did Life in Waves, which was about Susan Ciani, a pioneer of synthesizers, and so he already knew how to do it. So that right there made it very helpful. He could answer a lot of questions like fair use and just all sorts of stuff. Having somebody that was just further along in their journey than you are helped. But it also helped because Bradford came in at the editing process. He was not there for filming and concepting. So a lot of things, having a fresh set of eyes helped.
Right.
Because there were things that I can remember being there. I can remember being in New York and laughing with this guy when he said this funny thing. And I think it's the most hilarious thing. But having someone who wasn't there, who had no emotional attachment, he was just brought in after filming was done. Having someone to go, hey, man, I know you think this line is really cool, but you don't need it. It doesn't serve the story. You got to cut it. He was able to be he wasn't emotionally attached to the footage like me or Adam or even Sean were. Sean was our director of photography who also did some editing. He wasn't as invested as we were because he was just coming in at the 11th hour.
Sure.
So he was really able to go, guy, cut this, man. And I wasn't the one that had to do it. So it was very helpful.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, it's just like, well, it's not as extreme. It's not even quite extreme, but it's like pulling the plug on, something like, hey, I don't know, should we keep him? Should we not? It's hard to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Because you put all that time, energy, and effort to record those bits and stuff like that, and then to have to be like, you know what, it's not gonna cut it. But no, it is it is definitely a challenging process. So, right now, I mean, you're sitting at home, you're hanging out with the family. What have you been doing to keep your kind of, aside from the film stuff? I mean, yeah, you got to separate work from you have to live too sometimes. What have you guys been doing to kind of keep your sanity, just to hang out, be loose, and just kind of enjoy life at home?
Yeah, I mean, my kids are real awesome. They like a mixture of inside and outside stuff. So,
Good. Yeah.
we love like just going out for bike rides and going to parks and stuff like that. Like they just love nature. So, we've been able to stay away. We don't want to go into highly populated areas just yet. So
it's hard
we've been able
now.
We've been able to go on
opening.
walks and stuff like that. And then, we've watched a lot of movies. I've introduced my kids to a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool video games that I played, the Nintendo
There
and
you
Super
go.
Nintendo. We've gotten to really bond a lot. So it's been both this whole virus thing has been both a curse and a blessing. It has been great to, be at home with the people I love the most.
Sure. Final question. What have you learned most about yourself over this past year? And what has, if you can, obviously I don't think you could pinpoint one certain moment in your life, but what was a moment in your life that's really molded you into the person that you are today?
So over the past year, so during COVID, I've learned that, I think I've learned that I'm a lot more hyperactive than I thought I was. Like, I thought of myself as a homebody, but I'm really not. Like, I love
That's
going
exactly
out.
what I thought. I've been,
I love seeing people and going out and hanging out, and not whenever it's taken away completely. Even though I didn't, I love being a dad, and so I am home with my family, but I do love, I miss my friends and I miss going out. And, you know, even with my kids, you know, we would love to go to museums and aquariums and
Exactly.
stuff like that. Not being able to do that has been really difficult. I find
Sure.
myself kind of, you know, going stir crazy.
Every day
Yeah.
for me, every day.
And something that molded me, you know, golly, that is very difficult to pinpoint, you know. But I think, you know, my dad passed away
Mm.
a couple of years back, right in the middle of the
Sorry
orange
about that,
years.
man. It's
Oh,
horrible. I'm
yeah,
going through stuff like that with mine. He's really sick. It's horrible stuff.
yeah, it is. It's not great, you know.
No.
And you know, that's one of those wounds that you never heal from, you
Mm-mm.
know. And
Yeah.
it's like, you, everything else in your life you get over, you know. You have breakups, you have jobs, you have friendships, but you get over it, you know. But that was the first thing in my life that's like, okay, I'm never going to be totally the person I was before this
Right.
happened. I'm never going to get over this. Yeah, I'm a happy person. I've got my
Sure.
kids, I've got my family, I love my life, but I'm never going to get over. And so I think that's the one that taught me to, I kind of had a lackadaisical attitude of just letting things go. And that really cemented, like, okay, all your dreams, you better go for them now, because, you know, that's something that, realizing how quickly people can just leave this world.
Mm.
And you know, I wish he could have seen this movie, you know, and he
Yeah.
never did. And so that's one of those things where I'm like, you know, if you want something, get it, get it. So
Right.
my work ethic doubled after that, where it was like, I'm not messing around. You know, if there's something that I want to do, I'm going to try to do it, like,
Sure.
now. That's why, you know, like, soon as the Orange Years was wrapping up, I was editing the Orange Years. I'm filming my next film.
There you go.
You know, and now I'm editing my next film while I'm also doing, you know, promo for the Orange Years. And I'm already trying to come up with ideas for the film after this next film. You know, you gotta, if you want it, you can't let your dreams stay dreams,
Sure.
because you go, I'm going to get to that. I'm going to eventually do that. I'm going to eventually learn how to do this. Or I'm eventually going to do that. Realistically, you're probably not going to. You
Right.
got to do it now. Do it tomorrow. Wake up and make
Just
your
do it.
dreams reality. Just do it. Yeah.
Just do it. Well,
Yeah.
Scott, I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, man. My pleasure. Thank you, Christian. This was awesome.
You bet, man. Take care of yourself.
Yeah, you as well.